Hey, MBA hopefuls, you are live on the air with MBA Waves. My name is Eric Lucrezia, and I am joined as always by. Hi, Bara.
Me. Hi.
You-
It's
How's
great
it
to see
going,
you.
Bara? Great to see
It's
you too.
going, thank you. It's going great. It's like the times have changed. It's chilly out in Northern California and it's like brisk. It's like almost like fall when the air is crisp but bright blue skies. So it's really wonderful. So I'm having a good day already. It's good to see
Back
you.
back to school is finally in effect. Climate change, I think, is delayed. Yeah, it's pretty chilly here in Paris too. So listen, we're on episode 77 of MBA Waves. Really excited to talk about connecting with alumni on your MBA admissions journey, why it's important, and how to go about it. And actually, we're going to go a little bit beyond alumni and talk about current students as well. So, Bara, I don't know what you have in mind, but let's break into this conversation.
Well, I think one of the things that comes up all the time when we talk to different schools is the fact that alumni do some interviews, right? And then
Hmm.
also they really recommend talking to alumni. So since you've had so much experience with schools and with talking with students around this, can you talk a little bit about what the importance is of talking to alumni?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're looking at an MBA program, this means that you're probably going to be investing a year or two into a pretty expensive degree. You're not going to work for a year or two. So there's a lot of opportunity cost, and you really want to make sure you found the school that's the right fit. And going beyond the website and the brochures and talking with the recruiters, which are all there to market the school and show it in its best light, you'll get some honest truths from alumni most of the time. They're going to tell you the ups and downs of it, what was great, what was, a struggle, and so forth. So I think you get a little bit beyond the corporate, CMO presentation of the school. That's the first thing. The second thing is it should be really important to you for a bunch of reasons to connect with these alum, because these are the only people in the world that can tell you from beginning to end how the program is, like the whole story, from classes to career services to getting a job afterwards. Like, what did that degree do for them in their career? So these are really the only people that can do that. And the reason why I mentioned current students, which are often referred to as student ambassadors, they're important as well because they are the only people in the world with the most up-to-date version of the program. Like, an alum you speak to may have graduated 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. So, things evolve with MBA programs. So there's a lot of reasons.
I would also say though that a current student would be like they're right at the cusp of everything that's actually happening and have the most up-to-date information. But politically, they also might not want to say anything negative about the program, right? Like whereas an alumni, they have a bit more freedom because they're no longer in the system anymore, but they might have more school spirit because the way the memory works is a funny thing, right? They might
Right.
actually remember, like they might not remember the late nights of studying or the kind of toll that it took to be in the program. But I think that having that balance between current students and alumni, it gives you a really clear, balanced view. Do you agree with that?
100%. I mean, like, as you said, the current students, they're currently in the program, they're being evaluated, and probably aren't going to say anything too disparaging. But you never know. Sometimes you'll see a pissed off student on Twitter, like, go a little bit ballistic. He's upset about something, like he didn't get his desired internship or whatever it may be. But for the most part, I think people who are currently in the program, as well as alumni, you mentioned school spirit, or more, I would say, like, that brand is on their chest and on their CV for the rest of their lives. So it's only shooting themselves in the foot to like, really, for lack of a better word, shit on their own program. It's cutting off your nose to spite your face. I think you can expect some balanced answers. They'll tell you the things that were great, the alumni. They'll tell you what was really great for them in the program and afterwards. And the things that were weaker, they'll say it in a more balanced way if they're being honest. And I think that's fair because I don't think anyone expects any program to be perfect 100%. It's just not realistic.
You're talking also about this arc, from the application to the career.
Mm,
And one that we can also include on that is also the continual networking that happens in that
mm,
arc and beyond that arc, right? So when I think about students talking to alumni, it's not only great practice for them to be doing more networking and creating that reach, even if they don't wind up going to the school that the alumni went to, it's still creating that web of, I don't want to say influence, but that web of knowing other people, making the connection and getting better at networking because it is a skill.
Absolutely. I mean, it's total networking practice, especially like online, whether it's like sending messages via LinkedIn or you're doing a Zoom call or whatever it may be. But yeah, practicing that distance networking is it's an ever more important skill. And as you said, like the people that the alumni that you might reach out to, even if they graduate from a school that you end up not going to, these people are going to be working at big companies, and who knows, they could end up being a colleague, your supervisor one day. So it's never a waste for those reasons. But it should be super interesting for you to dig deep and get to know what these people have to say. And in fact, a lot of the admissions committees will require that you have spoken with alumni. And some of them will ask you outright, either in the application or during the interview. They want to know who you've spoken to. It's a sign that you care. It's a sign that you have professional maturity, that you're motivated to really dig deep and go into the research, and that they want to make sure that you're happy in the program as well. It's not just like, can you hack the academics? No, they want to make sure that you really know that this is the place for you and that you're going to be happy there. Because if you're not, then you're going to become a burden to them, frankly. You're going to be somebody they have to deal with who's never really happy with what the school's really about. So it's a super important part of the process.
So aside from LinkedIn, right, where you can actually look up people who are alumni, what are some of the other ways that you think people can find out about alumni, and how would you most recommend people approach alumni?
Yeah, so I'm going to like unpack that question a bit. So first of all, the website often has usually student ambassadors first, because these are current students in the program. The ambassador role that a lot of schools employ are either volunteer or sometimes they get a small stipend. But these students are essentially working for the program in a sense to give their experience, their perspective on the program. And as somebody who's doing the research, as somebody who's a potential applicant, the kinds of questions you want to ask them are like, how was their experience applying? What was the interview like? What's important to them to get admitted? You ask about the classes, professors, career services, all that kind of stuff. What you don't want to ask is about your eligibility. That would be like, it's not really an appropriate question for them because they're not in a position to properly evaluate you. And they're usually told by the people who are managing them, like the admissions office or the program manager, that they're not supposed to answer those kind of questions. So you better not go that route. So yeah, the website for the school is often where you can find current students. Alumni, sometimes they're on schools' websites, but not always. Sometimes a little bit, either you can ask the recruiter, can you put me in touch with a couple? Sometimes they'll come right out with it and say, hey, here's some alumni you should talk to, because don't forget, they're selling their program to you as well. But if not, you can dig around on LinkedIn. Like you just type in like, give me a school, Bara.
University of Michigan.
I knew you were going to say that, your alma mater. So Michigan Ross, type in LinkedIn, Michigan Ross, full-time MBA, for example. Not exactly sure what their name of their MBA is called, but yeah. And a whole bunch of people will pop up and you'll get a list of people. If you have any direct connections that you're like, oh, look at that. I didn't know Sally Smith went to Michigan also. Perfect. So you already know that person, right? If it's a second degree connection on LinkedIn, you could reach out to them and say, hey, looks like you also know Tommy Jones. Awesome, me too. I see you went to Michigan. I'm seriously thinking about applying to the school. Do you mind if we connect? I'd love to ask a couple of questions. Always send a personalized note if it's someone you don't know when you're reaching out to connect. And in a quick way, not too many words, just explain why you're reaching out, and so they're motivated to get in touch with you. The other way that you might meet alumni are at MBA fairs. A lot of times schools bring alumni along with them, because these are the living proof that the program actually works. And they might even organize like things outside of the fairs, like their own events. Like, for example, a couple of weeks ago here in Paris, Imperial College Business School had an alumni networking event, cocktail. So people who are interested in Imperial can meet with actual alum who are based here in Paris. So there's a lot of avenues to go about it.
I think actually you bring up a really good point, is that you can have fun with it. Like if you are wanting to wind up in Paris, or you're wanting to wind up in Vancouver or Los Angeles, you can look up, if you have a trip there, you can actually look up alumni perhaps in those cities, so that you can actually understand,
Yes.
for example, going to University of Michigan Ross, how does that affect someone who then winds up in LA or New York or in Paris? And obviously they're just case studies. They're not always the norm. But if there's a company that you're interested in working in, or there's a place that you're interested in settling down in, you might not want to wind up in Ann Arbor, Michigan after
Mm.
you get your MBA. You can actually be strategic about it. And if you're going on vacation somewhere, you can actually just kind of, loop that into your vacation and meet some people, some alumni that are in where it is that you're going.
Definitely take advantage. I mean, if you're traveling for business or if you're even traveling for vacation, if you could turn that into a little business trip and write it off, even better idea that
I
you're
wasn't going to say
researching.
that, but yes.
I mean, if that works, then that works. But it also does show you the breadth of the program, right? If you're looking, just take Michigan Ross, which is obviously in the state of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Um, by far, not all their alumni are remain there or in the Midwest. Even they go far. They go to the coasts. They go abroad. And if you have a business trip to, I don't know, London or Brussels or Hong Kong, and you can see if there's any alumni in town, and you can see, hey, what kind of global career I can have from this school. That's super interesting. Um,
There's a question. We got a question up here. So Ross is asking, are student ambassadors' correspondence monitored by the universities? And if so, do you find this hinders their honesty about the program's negatives? That's exactly what I was saying, like a current student versus an alumni, that there might be more freedom. And I'll piggyback on this. I want to hear what you have to say about it. What then, like, will the alumni go back to the schools also and say something to the schools if they have an interview or a meeting with a prospective student?
hmm. Yeah, interesting. So first, Ross's question, are they monitored? It's going to depend from school to school. I can just speak about my experience when I was director of recruitment for the MBA at Essex Business School, and we never monitored them. We gave them instructions and how we asked them the kind of tone, being professional, but being a student, being easygoing, approachable, fun, kind of like us. But we didn't get into their emails and look at that. First of all, we don't have time for that. And I doubt any of the business schools out there really have time to be checking everyone's email. But I suppose if there was a complaint, then maybe they would check it out. So I doubt it, Ross. But thank you for the question. And Bara, you were saying what else about alum?
Well, I'm just curious, like, let's say there is an issue. Let's say that there's an interview and it's very strange, or something weird happens, or something amazing happens, right? Like, it was such a positive experience. Do those alumni go back to the school, to the admissions, and let them know that they had this meeting, or is it just informational for the applicant?
Okay, so there's two things, right? There's alumni that you might contact as somebody who's interested in a program and you haven't yet applied, or maybe you're in the process of applying, you've reached out to some alum. And then there's the alumni interview, which is very much a formal, official kind of thing that a lot of schools do employ either as part of the process or it is the interview because they don't have enough people to interview everyone. Um, it really depends. I think a lot of alumni do report back, especially if it's somebody who's particularly good or particularly bad. If you had a really good connection, whether it's an unofficial if it's let's talk about the unofficial. If it's an unofficial kind of exchange, and there was a real connection. There's like, wow, this person's really bright. They're really interesting. They've got a lot going on for them. We would love to have them as part of our program, as part of our brand, part of our school. Then that alum, if it's in their personality to do so, if they have the time, they would probably send them emails like, hey, just spoke with this person, look out for their application, they're a superstar. And by the way, they're also applying for XYZ schools, and we want to get them for us. That's one thing. If it was particularly bad, that might be another thing too. If they're so motivated, they might say, hey, listen, I spoke with this candidate, something's off, and I just want you to have a heads up kind of thing. Now, if we're talking about official interviews, for sure they're coming back. I mean, that is their job. They've been usually trained. If a school usually it's some of the larger or more popular schools that just do not have the bandwidth or staff to interview every single person, they will depend on alumni as the interview. And so these alumni are usually trained in a formal way, so they know the kinds of questions to ask and certain, like I would say, behavior cues, so they know what kind of tone they're trying to set. And yeah, they're absolutely reporting. So yeah. I think any exchange you have, whether it's a call, an email, a LinkedIn thing, all of these are opportunities to define your personal brand, which is something we talk a lot about in MBA Waves and a lot of other platforms as well. Your personal brand is the image of yourself that you exude, right? And that, as I like to say, is is in person, on paper, and in pixels. So like in person, obviously, if you're doing a campus visit or at an MBA fair, you're meeting people and like how you dress, how you speak, how you talk to people, all of that, plays into it. The impressions that you make on them. On paper is usually your resume or your CV, kind of the same thing in this world. And pixels, well, that's obviously the computer, right? So these are all opportunities, and you want to put your best foot forward. If you're going to any kind of event, think of a few things that you could say about yourself. Think of a couple of either achievements or a couple of stories. Read up on the news. So you have a couple of things to talk about, so that makes like networking and meeting a new person a little bit easier, especially if you're more on the introvert side, which can be a little bit of a challenge, but it's a skill that you can train for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, also looking on LinkedIn at people's how people present themselves and the alumni and what
And
they're interested
beyond.
in. Yeah, and seeing exactly like where there's points of connection. Like someone like you can find out that they're really into like wines of Northern California or dogs, right? And then you're able
Two
to
things I
really,
love.
right? And so you're able to actually have a conversation that's not just about the school, but it really demonstrates your network ability. And I think that that's important because remember, business school is not just about spreadsheets and widgets, right? It's really about relationships and building relationships.
Yes.
And so the networking that you're doing is really cultivating that. And for especially the informal ones, I mean, you mentioned that for the ambassadors and for some of the alumni that the schools hire to do this, right? Or they get a stipend to do this. That's a job. Like that is something that's a responsibility. But this is people's time, right? So regardless, it's about being respectful of their time. And time goes flies when you're having fun, right? So you want the networking to be fun and informative, but it should be something super enjoyable for you and for them, right? So you don't want it to be super droll. So doing a little bit of due diligence ahead of time and finding out who you're talking to, where they're from, where they went to school, where they went to undergrad. There's so many points of connection that we can have with people around us. So respecting time and just and being on target with different ideas, I think is a great thing. Finding out current events, especially if you're going someplace where like if someone was here, if someone was talking about something happening here, you might talk about midterms, but not get into politics, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
you
you
steer
want to be
away from.
sensitive to some issues like that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the student ambassadors, it's a job. Yes, absolutely. There's a certain responsibility they have, but also don't forget they're also full-time MBA students. So they've got a pretty full-on schedule between all the classes and the group projects, presentations, company visits. I mean, it is intense. So I mean, if you don't get a response from the student ambassador in like 24 hours or even like could be like a week, like don't flip out at them. Like really, you want to always be polite and professional. And if they're not getting back to you, you can send a little nudge, like say, hey, I sent you a message like a few days ago, last week or whatever. Would you mind getting back to me? And by the way, most schools have between 5 and even 20 student ambassadors, depending on the size of the program, um, on the website. So if you're not hearing back from someone, try someone else. But they do not work for you, is the point. They work for the school. And so being demanding or imposing is never looks good. Um, Second thing is the alumni. They definitely do not work for you, and they do not work for the school in most cases. They're out there in the universe working hard at whatever company, kicking butt in their careers. And if you manage to land on somebody who is willing to take some time, definitely be respectful of that and be appreciative. What I would suggest is like when you reach out to them via LinkedIn, say, "Hey, I have like 2 or 3 questions I'd like to ask," and then if they do agree to meet with you, before you actually meet, like think through and write down 2 or 3, maybe 4 max questions that you can ask them. But don't like come with a list of 300 questions, and don't come unprepared without any specific questions in mind. Like, first of all, and I always say this, it is your job, your responsibility to read everything that is on that website. Like the schools spend big bucks and a lot of time making a website that is complete and should have everything that you need to know. Of course, there's not going to be everything, but you've gone through it and you know all the basics. So you're not going to come out with some like basic question to waste the alumni's time with, or the student ambassadors. And by the way, the same thing goes for professors, career services, anyone from administration that you or faculty that you might reach out to or have an opportunity to engage with. Like, don't waste your time with like BS questions. So that's what I mean by being respectful. And I think that's what you meant too, as well, Bara, of their time.
Yeah, yeah, I do, and also talking about the full arc and about
Mm,
being respectful and reaching out to people, you can also think about, and we've talked about this before, and thank you, Ross, also again for asking the question, is that you could actually show some gratitude and thank them afterwards, right? So you always want to be appreciative of their time. I don't think a gift is necessary, but certainly a
no,
handwritten note would be like beyond. Who gets handwritten notes these days, right? It would be such a nice thing, especially if you really refer back to something that you spoke about or something that you felt, um, intrigued you or allowed you to
mm,
think more about something. I think that having that depth of character. I mean, I think that sending thank you notes really shows character and that you care, and it's sort of a lost art. So a
mm.
handwritten note. Remember, we used to write handwritten notes. Remember that? I still do
Remember
sometimes.
when I broke up my calligraphy pen? No, I mean, I think yes, I totally
The
agree
one
with
with the
that.
feather. The
Yeah,
one
the
with the
the big
feather.
plume, right? I gotta find that. No, for anyone that's interviewed you, I totally agree with that. Whether it's an alum or admin, definitely a handwritten note or someone who's written you a reference. That's like the big one, right? Like this is somebody who's taken time to think about and reflect upon your career and say beautiful things about you to hopefully get you into that top business school that's gonna like, catapult your career. They deserve a handwritten note, no perfume. But a student ambassador, first of all, you probably wouldn't have their address. Um, and that makes me think of something. I've seen some things over the years. Um, Talking with the student ambassador is definitely not a time for romance. Like sometimes people get the wrong idea that they're going to connect in a more romantic way, and this is absolutely not okay. Always keep it professional. They're there just to answer some questions about their experience, and that's it. And alumni as well about their experiences. And what I would also say is like for all of these people, that you manage to engage with by phone, LinkedIn, whatever, ask if you can connect with them on LinkedIn. You want to start to grow your network. And it also sends a signal to the other schools that are looking at you. Let's say you're applying for Michigan Ross, but you're also like, linking up with alumni at, I don't know, Stanford or Darden or Keenan Flagler or whatever. They're going to see all these people that you're connected with. The alumni might not necessarily know, but the professional staff, they're going to probably know those people. Like, oh, they know Samantha. Oh, they know Gordon. You know, it sends a signal that like we've got competition. So if we want this candidate, um, we should continue to court them and perhaps think about some scholarship. Um, Obviously, no guarantee there, but if they have any kind of leeway on that, if you're like on the fence between getting and not getting a certain scholarship, if the networking piece helps in so many ways. Fundamentally, it is super important for you to understand that this is the right school for you, but all the other advantages of how the impact on the admissions process is there too.
It's also really important to understand how the alumni is treated by the school, right? And
Mm,
what kind of resources they have for the alumni, and what kind of, I know we've spoken with some schools that really talk about they're there for the students way beyond their first job, right? They're like that. It's I don't want to say a marriage, but it's really a commitment. What schools have that commitment to their alumni, and what schools
mm.
just are like, see ya, right? So understanding what the school, like how the school sees their alumni and how they treat their alumni, it might be part of your decision making process. You might want to have
100%.
a school that really looks at the people who have attended in a very sort of honoring way and a resourceful way, right?
Mm.
Like some schools might go to alumni to talk to them about jobs at the companies, right? That they're currently at, and have relationships with the companies, but also those alumni might go back to the school, and what kind of relationship you're basically creating that's a lifelong. It's not just branding, it's a lifelong
Mm.
commitment and relationship that you have that goes back and forth. So I think that that's also, you'll find out a little bit about
Mm.
what's like IRL in alumni land.
You can kind of tell when you talk to alum, the ones that have had a great experience during the program or who are very grateful for the careers that they've had since their MBA, or the career services that is provided by the alumni services after they graduate. You can expect things like either annual big events or smaller events throughout the year, career support in terms of like, okay, you graduated 3 years ago, but you're looking at another career move. Either you're not happy with this company and you want to change, You're going to relocate to another country and you want to get put in touch with the alumni chapter in that other country. All of these things are very common career services that go on, I should say alumni services that go on after you graduate. Some schools even offer the possibility to take a class or two for free, like each year as an alum. So there's lots of benefits. And these are some of the questions you want to ask the school, ask the recruiter, ask the alumni. But you can kind of tell when you talk to them by like how happy and willing they are. Like some of them are just so full of excitement when they talk. You can just tell that they had a great experience. They don't even have to say a word. It's just all in their energy, right? In their eyes and their tone of voice and so forth. So look out for that. And when as you start to talk to a few alumni, you can start to make the comparison. And you'll figure out which one's right for you. But I will bring up one little thing, one little caveat. There are cultural differences. The US tends to be very rah rah pom pom, and it's all about school spirit. Look,
Us?
I mean, I went to Hofstra University. I remember the football games, the tailgating, the whole thing, the kick line, everything. That's the US. And you don't really see that outside of North America. Canada, a bit. Canada's like half American, half European, I'd say, in a lot of ways. And I guess you could say the same thing about the UK. But you get in the continent of Europe and in Asia, you don't have that same kind of pep, let's say. So if you're not seeing that and you're talking to alum from European or Asian business schools, like don't be alarmed. It's just culturally a little bit different, a little bit more reserved, and not the same like, kind of campus experience that you might expect from an undergrad institution, especially in the in the US. Ross made a funny comment. Go blue. Nice.
Yeah, I will say I have a graduate degree also from the Jewish Theological Seminary, and when all this stuff started happening with Kanye and anti-Semitism, they like created something for all their alumni. There's some classes that they're offering. I was in the School of Education, and how do we approach this and how it's showing up now? And I thought that was really on point. What do you do? I don't know what a business school specifically would do, but what if things are happening? I mean, we just saw yesterday Kellogg has announced that if people have been let go from some of these tech companies, Twitter and whatnot, that it might be a good time to approach and that they're waiving their GMAT, right? So I don't know that reflects alumni, but schools are really engaged with what's happening in the moment and what's going on. And so knowing how they relate.
Totally. Yeah, I saw that Wall Street Journal article as well. What Kellogg is doing for layoffs from big tech like Twitter, Facebook, and so forth. I mean, it's really timely. It's quite sensitive. It's actually super smart because these people are well vetted in their interview process. They're obviously bright and capable people. And as I think I'm quoting Linda Abramson, I don't know how to pronounce her name. She said she called it a gift, and it is. Like they often will not have the time, and it's like, crap, I just lost my job. Here's an opportunity. Let's do an MBA at a top school. Absolutely.
Yes, Abraham. Yeah, and she's one of the founders of AGAC. Actually, she's one of the founding members.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's leadership school, and so the whole arc of your process of applying, having that alumni thread really demonstrates your leadership potential or building on it. So it does make sense to continue. Just always think, what would a leader do? How would you do this? How are you presenting yourself to this other alumni as a leader in training? But most people who are applying to business school are already leaders, right? That you're just getting your skills honed and making more connections. So anyway, this was super interesting, Eric. I'm glad that we delved into this topic.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, because you got me thinking, we were speaking about LinkedIn and connecting there. Following schools, like a lot of people, I think, have the mistaken presumption that on LinkedIn the schools that you follow should be the ones that you've attended, and that's not necessarily the case. I think people should follow the schools that they're targeting, and maybe even schools that they don't necessarily want to attend, but they respect because they know they are producing great minds and great great things. And so by following whatever number of schools that you're interested in, you're going to receive you'll see on your newsfeed all the things they're coming out with. So like that Kellogg news is very fresh. So staying in the know. And by the way, next time you speak with an alum or a current student, you'll be able to speak very intelligently about the latest ongoings and current events on that school's campus and what their policies might be and so forth. So super helpful. LinkedIn, I always say, is your best friend.
I would also say Instagram would probably be another good place to follow Instagram, the schools on Instagram, and
Mm,
maybe I don't maybe Twitter also. But I know that I had it's totally unrelated, but like I had a consumer issue come up recently, and I
okay.
went on to Instagram and I commented on the company's page, and man, I got an email very quickly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And so it's obviously like a different orientation, but I do think that engaging there might also be good. Even I don't know that the social media people that they have in place, but a school might see that you're engaging at different levels or with different students or with different professors. So it's still giving you the knowledge. It's not just making an outward appearance. It's really embracing a way for you to be and a way for you to be curious and engaged.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a good way to go.
It's interesting. I think LinkedIn is Instagram is a really good complement to all the other research that
Yeah.
you, as candidates out there in cyberspace, would be doing. I mean, like connecting with alumni and current students from the website, the student ambassadors, great. It'll be a little bit more polished, but it's also usually in text form, like by email. They're all usually answering questions. Whereas obviously Instagram is much more visual, imagery, videos, and so forth, and you get a more, I don't know, a sense of the vibe, right? That feeling question, right? Of the campus. And I do see a lot of schools doing that on Instagram. Not all of them, but
Not
some are. And
mhm.
if you prefer, that could be a great way to get in touch with a student ambassador there. Like I know some schools are super active. I just saw one recently. I can't remember what school it was, but it was a young woman who was like, "Hey, I'm Emily, whatever, taking over, X school's Instagram. So follow me." And she's like making all this great video content. It's interesting. And I hadn't written to her, but I imagine if you do, you'll get an answer and she'd be happy to answer questions. So yeah,
Yeah.
Instagram's another good way to go
It'll
about
be
it.
interesting to see if TikTok winds up being a way, because it's so new and edgy in a way. So it'll be interesting to see if schools embrace that. I haven't looked, frankly, um, for schools on that. That might be an interesting
Yeah,
topic.
me as an admissions consultant, I kind of stayed away from it first. I was like, it's basically, dancing teenagers. But actually, no, there's so much content on there, like professional advice,
Mm,
finance advice, educational advice. So yeah, got loads of content on TikTok these days too. Um, but yeah. All right, Bara. Well, this has been interesting. Thank you so much.
thank you so much.
And for all of
Ross.
you out there, be sure to tune in next week, every Tuesday, for MBA Waves. Next week, we're talking about the biggest surprises unveiled by MBA grads. So see you then. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.